Hey, today we're going to be talking about car stereos. The question is, do you replace them? And if you have a Sprinter van, the answer is probably yes. Unless, with the one exception of if you have one of the newer models, 2018 or newer, and you have the highest end of the 3 different stereos that they offer, then maybe you want to keep it unless there's some functionality that you decide that you really want, you can't live without it. Then maybe you go to an aftermarket stereo. But like I said, otherwise the answer is probably yes. I know it's a little bit of a pain in the neck having to switch it out. It's some work, and obviously you have to pay for everything, but it's worthwhile. The car stereos that Mercedes-Benz installed prior to the highest model in 2018, that one exception that I mentioned, are notorious for being very low quality, low end, barely working, not great, right? So pretty much everybody wants to replace them. And these days the technology is amazing, right? Here we've got one that's a 7-inch touchscreen. This is the one that I just installed. This is the finished product here. It's a Pioneer 4200 NEX, and it's got a lot of different functionality to it for the year that it came out, which was actually a couple of years ago. It took me a little while to get it installed, a little bit of a delay there, but it's in now, works great, everything's good. But, there's a lot of different ones out there, and this is no longer the biggest thing out there. These days you've got models that are, just you put a tablet or an iPad on top, and behind that it's just a flush wall, and it's all Bluetooth wireless, and just everything goes through an app on your tablet, and then you just walk away with the tablet at the end of the day. That's it. Easy. So you've got all kinds of technology that's out there. Feel free to scour the internet, pick whatever you want for your install, and you can do all kinds of things. There are a few limitations, and so having done this, I wanted to talk about that a little bit, about what the limitations are. So if you have the older, pre-2018 double DIN system, then you have a lot of wiring, a lot of bells and whistles. It's a little bit more work, but it does give you more options, particularly if you want to have steering wheel control with your thumbs and to be able to use the steering wheel. If you want that functionality and you just can't live without that, then you needed to have the Sound 20 double DIN, this size stereo, factory stereo. And it's a little bit of a trick to get it to work, but you can do it. If you got the Sound 5, like I did, the cheap single DIN, small, half the size of this, and there was like a little cubby, like the cubby down here. There's a cubby here as well. If you got that one, which was that was the standard one in all the cargo vans. This was a cargo van. And this was a 2013. So if you got that one, then the wiring is simpler. There's less wires to deal with. There's only 5 wires outside of the speaker wires, the speakers themselves. So there's only 5 wires to deal with. But the downside is trying to get the steering wheel buttons to work is a bit tricky. I gave up on it and walked away. I think that there's probably a way to get it to work somehow, but I don't know what it is. The straight harness adapters are not good enough, unfortunately, in that case. But we'll talk about wiring in a little bit. We're going to come back to that. First, let's talk about parts, and also one other thing, a little shout out to 5 Star Car Stereo out of Florida. They have a ton of videos on how to and doing reviews of different stereo systems. So no matter what stereo system you end up picking out, check these guys out. There's a link down below. There's a bunch of links down below this video, so please do read through that. So 5 Star Car Stereo, they review all kinds of stuff, whether it's the car stereo itself review. So we've got wonderful reviews for this unit, pretty much any unit out there. I think they've reviewed it, as well as they cover a lot of wiring. Perhaps for the DVD portion of this, you have to install a emergency brake bypass of some type, so that you can play videos while the vehicle is in motion. And if you have kids, and if you install like little TVs on the back of the seats, or a big projector, or a LCD or plasma or whatever, you install that somewhere so that the kids can watch it and be happy while you're driving, you need to install the bypass brake thing. And they show you how to do that, which one to get. I did that. I haven't tested it out yet, but that was a pretty easy install. That was probably one of the easiest things to do. So that was cool. Thanks to them for doing a video on how to wire that, and basically a ton of other stuff. They've been very helpful all the way throughout, and they're kind of funny guys to watch. So give them check them out. Let's talk about parts. Now, this isn't for the head unit, so it doesn't matter which radio you get. This is for a Sprinter van, right? And again, this is a 2013 Sprinter, so this would be good for 2012 through 2017, 18, any Sprinter in that time period. You got one of two different stereos. You either have the Sound 5, the Sound 20, right? Sound 5 is the single DIN, super cheapo, or the Sound 20 if you got like a passenger van. Maybe you got the double DIN system that they were offering for those with a passenger van. If you got the Sound 5, then you are looking for the harness adapter MB1, that's Axxess, AXXESS, MB1, which is small and square. It's basically a small square little cube looking thing. If you got the passenger van or one of the more expensive ones, the double DIN system Sound 20, then you want the MB2, which is bigger, right? The size of the box is bigger, and it has like a V-shaped cutout. And again, I'll do hopefully a picture or something and then some URLs down below so that you can see the difference between the two. So this gives you a sense of the block harness that you need. What you do is you take that, and the wires coming out of the back, you wire that into whatever head mount you got. And so you have to like kind of connect them up. That part is straightforward color coding, pretty universal. Shouldn't have too much trouble with that. That part should be easy wherever you buy it. However, I do want to point out that the Axxess MB1 and MB2, or any of the Metra is the other one, that's the brand competitor, Metra. If you buy either one of those, the price point is somewhere between $30 and $80. I think the MSRP is like 80 or 90 bucks for the combo of the two, in case you really don't know what you need. Then there's a combo package. If you do know what you need, you're still going to pay 50 bucks. If you shop around a little bit, you can maybe get it down to 30 bucks. And really what you're paying for at that point is the steering wheel control part, which seems to be just really problematic and whatever. Again, I skipped out of that. Basically, I sent all that stuff back. I sent all of it back. And I just went over to eBay and I bought a very simple small block adapter with some wires, and that was like $7. Much cheaper, much simpler. I can't use the steering wheel controls. I don't care. Just a hell of a lot easier, because I ran into all kinds of other wiring problems, so I just maxed out on my frustration level and had to move on. I wasn't going to mess around with it anymore. Speaking of other problems, the antenna. You need an antenna adapter. Have to have an antenna adapter. There's a gajillion of them out there, and they're all different sizes and types, and it's really tough to figure out which one you actually need. And in the end, the one that you need is the Metra 40-VW, like VW Volkswagen 12. That's the one that you need, and I got it for $7 on eBay. Super cheap, easy peasy. That's the one you need. It's very small, it's very condensed, it's only about yay big. That's the one you need, believe it or not. So, moving on, frames. The frame that I have here was a relatively cheap frame. I think it was like $15. It's okay, it's not great. I think that there's a better one out there, because when you pull all this stuff out, what you see is that right about here, vertically, and over here, there's a like kind of wedged area where you could put in a support, which would be nice for the back end of the unit, because this thing is only held in by a couple of screws in the front, which means that the back end, if there's any weight, it's just wobbling around. There's nothing there to support it. So there is one out there made by Scosche that's 20, 25 bucks, somewhere in that range. So it's $5 to $10 more expensive than the one that I bought, which works okay, we'll see. But that one does have the notch outs on the sides here, up at the top, on the sides up at the top, and that would be preferable. I mean, it really seems like it was actually custom made for a Sprinter and not just kind of two pieces of plastic slapped together. So I haven't had a chance to check it out, but having found it after the fact, if I were to do everything over again, that's the one I would pick. Now, in regards to the harness portion again, sorry, kind of rolling back around to that, you have an option of whether to use straight wires and, you know, either crimp them together or solder them together or do something like that, or you can solder them together and then run RCA lines kind of through wherever, depending on what else you're doing, which maybe you want to do that, maybe you don't. That's your option. There are some male and female things. I had to add in, because this was a cargo van, I wanted to add in a couple of rear speakers. I wanted to take advantage of that, and I did that. And so I just ran RCA lines all the way to the back, and then, you know, all the way to the front. So because the harness that I bought on eBay had RCA lines, which are typically reserved for lo-fi, not hi-fi, right? So hi-fi are the bare wires that roll through, and they run through at about 10, 11 volts, I want to say, whereas your lo-fi rolls through at like 1 or 2 volts. It's like very low, and because it's meant to go out to an amplifier, right, in all the speakers or somewhere, right? So you need to have an amplifier somewhere. The signal goes to the amplifier boosts it up back up to the 11, 12 volt or amps, volts, amps, I want to say volts, and then it goes out from there and produces the sound. So if you hook up, typically if you hook up your RCAs, you try to listen to it, you have to crank the volume all the way up just to be able to hear it. It's not very loud, and that's because they're lo-fi. They're very like low energy output because you have a separate amplifier that's going to bump it up. But you don't have to do that. You can hook up your hi-fi lines into RCAs and then just do male-female connectors all the way throughout. And that makes it, the advantage of doing that is that if you ever need to replace anything or change anything at some point in the future, you can certainly do that. It's a lot easier to swap it out. You don't have to be like clipping lines and doing all kinds of craziness. You just do it once in the back of the head unit, and then that's it. You just run RCAs all the way to the back, and then at the back speakers, when you have the lines, you have to do a male RCA there too. Anyway, all the parts down below in the details, check it out. And that's it for parts. Okay. Yeah, so now also I'm going to have a couple of video links down below in regards to ripping apart the dash to get to this. So there'll be a couple of videos down there on how to do that to help you along in your first steps of pulling this apart. And then after that, now let's talk about the really tough part, which is the wiring. I already talked about the Sound 5 versus the Sound 20, how the Sound 20 a little more complicated, more wires, and there's a video from DIY Sprinter Van. He installed this same head unit, and he's done a couple of speakers in the doors, and he's done a couple of other things throughout his Sprinter Van. Great videos, please do check them out. Those are fantastic. That will, if you have a Sound 5 double DIN system, his videos will help you with the wiring. He ran into some problems there. He makes a bunch of recommendations, very detailed, very good. If you have the Sound 5, that's the one that I had, and I can talk more about that. There's also videos from Quality Mobile Video, which is a basic tutorial on wiring, right? The color coding, what's what. So those are great videos just to get a sense of basic wiring and how to do basic car radio install. So it's like a one-on-one tutorial class. And the video link is down below. Please do check that one out. That's worth your time. It's worth your time to look at these for various reasons. If the DIY Sprinter Van, only if you have the Sound 20 is that really applicable, but the Quality Mobile videos, that's kind of for everybody. If you're doing anything like this, you should watch that video just to get a sense of what's what, because you're going to have to do, so you have to have a good sense of what's going on. Anyway, and there was another gentleman who had almost the same van as this one, had the Sound 5, was putting in a different head unit than this one, but he had a lot of wiring problems, and so his video was very good at helping kind of troubleshoot some of those wiring problems. He has some very unique solutions. I'm not sure if I would try to repeat what he was doing, but I suspect that he ran into some of the same, I'm going to call them catastrophic problems, because there were some wires that had clearly shorted in my system, and I suspect that he had the same problem. He just didn't realize it. And so he was trying to get work through those. His video is very good. His handle name is Fit Organic Living. Again, link down below, so please do check that out. As well, if you have a 2012 through 2017 Sprinter van and you're replacing the head unit and doing the wiring yourself. His solution was to cut out the harness entirely and then use crimp ties with all the wiring to put it together. Pretty much everybody, every professional that I've looked at has said don't do that, because with the vibration of the vehicle, that stuff tends to come loose. So, not so great. Most professionals will tell you to solder it together. That's great if you can get your solder gun in here and you're decent at soldering. Soldering is a bit of an art skill. I've done a little bit of it. You pick it up, you learn it, right? The more you do it, the more you learn, but there is a little bit of a learning curve, so don't expect to step into it and just do it right off the bat. Which is why people use the crimp ties, because that's a bit easier, sort of. I think the secret there is just getting crimp ties that are small enough. That's going to be the challenge, because a lot of the wires are very, very small. Anyway, let's talk about the wiring. So with the Sound 5, once you get the speaker wires kind of out of the way, because the speaker wires are a straight shot, that's easy peasy straight shooting. The problem that you run into is with your power wires, and you have 5 of those, right? So you got 5 different power wires, and on the Mercedes-Benz, they are color-coded as, let's see here, you got your red and black wire, which is going to be your constant power. So if you take a voltmeter, you will be able to measure 12 volts coming off that line all the time. Cars on, cars off, doesn't matter. Okay. Then you're going to have your yellow and black wire, which is your antenna trigger. So that's antenna support, because the antennas on Sprinter vans are notorious for not being very good. And believe it or not, this right here is an amplifier to juice this thing up and give it a little more juice so that the signal is a little bit better. Yeah, believe that? Crazy, despite the fact that the antennas really don't work very well. Signal reception on radios and Sprinters is notoriously bad. But yeah, they come with a built-in amplifier. It's right here, and but you got to trigger it, right? It's got to get triggered and turned on. This little yellow and black line here that runs all the way back down around and into back here. And most head units will have a antenna trigger, or I think they call it a remote control option, right? Because some cars have antennas that pop out and come back down, various things like that. So it's a standard feature on most vehicles, and almost every head unit will have it. I think on the head unit it is a blue color, I want to say. Blue antenna, yes, blue color for the antenna. So you want to take your yellow and black and connect it to the blue color. The red and black from the Mercedes-Benz Sprinter, constant power on most universal things is yellow. So you're going to connect those two, pretty straightforward. The thick brown one that's in the back here in the corner of the Mercedes-Benz Sprinter is your ground. So you're going to connect that to the black. So that's what you're going to do there. Those ones are straightforward. Now you run into the last two, which are a little tricky, right? Which is your illumination line, which is when you turn on your headlights at night, turns the brightness on or whatever, turns it, I guess, brighter during the day, and then, you know, still on, but a little dims down at night. That's your illumination line. And then most importantly, your accessory power line. This is the thing that when you turn the car on, this is what turns the stereo system on. And when you turn the car off, turns the stereo system off. This one on mine was shorted out. It was not working properly. But let's talk about the color coding first. The color coding, as far as I can figure, the thin brown wire is the accessory power wire, and the brown and red wire is the illumination wire. As far as I could figure. Those two, all the wiring diagrams were saying that it could be one or the other, and sometimes they alternate back and forth, and like it's just really hard to tell, and just nobody knows. So when I took the multimeter and I tested these out, the thin brown one started off on 12 volts, which was enough to turn the stereo on, and then shot down to 4 volts when I turned the rest of the car on. So I can't tell if the draw of energy was just going out somewhere else or what was going on there. The brown with the red stripe, that one was going from 0 when the car was off to 1 volt when the car was on. And then it didn't really change when I flicked the lights on and off, or at least not much. I think it dropped by like a little bit, like it dropped to like 0.8 volts or something like that. So it was a little confusing, hard to tell. So I'm going to say that the brown with the red stripe was the illumination, and that's that. And then the thin brown line was just not working properly, as far as I can figure. Now, the guy who I mentioned who did the video from Fit Organic Living, he thinks that those are data lines. That's what he calls them, data lines. And I don't think that's quite right. That doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Maybe one of those is a data line, but if it is a data line, then it's the illumination line is the data line, the brown with the red stripe, because it's got such a low voltage. There's basically nothing running through there. So if that's a data line, I mean, I suppose that's possible. Maybe. Anyway, so I ended up by having to fix this somehow, and what I ended up by doing was rerouting power, like the Fit Organic Living guy, from somewhere else. Now he runs it from the fuse box down by your left foot when you're driving. There's a fuse box down there. He ran it from down there because he was able to find 2 terminals that basically kicked on when the car is engaged and then turned back off again. I'm going to point out that those are critical systems for the vehicle, and that adding additional circuit strain is maybe not the best idea at that point. So I didn't do that. What I did is I ran it in the fuse box under the seat. The top left-hand corner, I believe the fuses 1 through 9, all engage when the vehicle is turned on and disengage when it's turned off. The other 3/4 of the fuses that are there are hot all the time, so you don't want those. But those first 1 through 9 in the top left-hand corner of that quadrant of fuses, just under the seats, so you open the door, there's a little box there, peel it off the side. That first little bunch there, those ones are good. So pick and choose any of those. Look for little metal sections. I'll try and get a picture and show it to you. Try to find little metal sections there, and you can kind of get into you can run anything in there, and that'll work. Throw a fuse in there, run some wires in there, and as long as there's like some kind of connection, then that works. I went on eBay and purchased used parts from a crashed vehicle, and I bought that fuse box, and so I was able to pull the connectors out and rewire those connectors. So I actually had the Mercedes-Benz OEM fuse circuit breaker things, which I'll try and get a picture of those and post that up here somewhere, so that you can see what that looks like. It's very unique. It's not like anything else that's out there. So if you're going to do that, you kind of have to do what I did: go out to eBay, find a little fuse box from a crash box that they're selling for $10, and buy that and have it show up, and you can pull those out and make that work. So that was my workaround for making that work, and I think that's it.